Welcome back to Ecom Growth Insider, the show where we go behind the scenes with top D2C founders, operators, and marketers and unpack what's actually working to scale e-commerce brands today. And today's guest is Sebastian Williams, one of the sharpest meta media buyers and e-commerce growth experts I know. We have been very close friends for years, and I've seen firsthand how he scales the hell out of e-commerce brands. And that's without burning cash or hiding behind flashy return ad spend screenshots. He used to manage 6- and 7-figure ad spends at top agencies, working with brands like Dr. Squatch, Snow, or Thrive Causemetics. But now he partners directly with a handful of D2C brands, helping them scale profitably, sustainably, and with way more clarity. This episode is a masterclass on creative strategy, financial modeling, and what's actually moving the needle in 2026 for founders, operators, and media buyers alike. If you run ads, work with an agency, or just want to grow smarter, you'll want to hear every single second of this. Sebastian, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic. How are you?
Yeah, doing great. Excited to finally have you on. I wanted to do that for quite a while, but we never got the chance to do this. Do you want to give people a quick story, like how you went from media buying to operating in fast-growing brands yourself? And
Yeah. One, excited to be here. Like it's having been on a few different podcasts at this point. Obviously, I'm sure you'll go into it at some point. How close we are, how long we've talked for. Excited to be a part, and get to share a little bit of what I've learned. For me, over the last 2 years, it's been a little bit of a journey. But I basically started off running Facebook ads for a sports memorabilia company. Went to agency side for a little bit after that. Spent about 2 years with different agencies, growing media buying departments for 7 to 8 figure D2C brands. And then after that, ended up going on my own and working one-to-one with these brands, just trying to implement what I learned from working with larger brands. I would say when I worked at my first agency, those are like 9-figure, like 8 to 9-figure, and those are much larger. And so being able to like plug what I learned there into these smaller brands who maybe just want to be able to crack 8 figures. That was very helpful. Been able to like scale revenue much faster for those brands, right? So I've only worked with 2 to 3 right now, and those 2 to 3 have all doubled their revenue year over year. Just being able to plug in a lot of things I learned from my previous experience.
Nice. And I think for you, at least for me, it's quite unique that you pretty early worked with huge or pretty big brands and pretty big budgets. Because for me, like when I just started the journey, like the first few clients were spending like $10 to $20 per day on meta ads. And then it's slowly like some of them I scaled up, some of them like found like bigger clients, and then it went to $50 to $100 per day. And then slowly it went up and up. And I think for you, it went way faster than that, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, for me, when I first started at the agency, I had that first job experience. I was there for about 10 months and really wanted to up level myself and really get around a bunch of people running ads on a deep level. So I went over to the agency side and joining a larger agency as basically like a brand new media buyer. Day one, just kind of tossed in the weeds of, these massive spenders, like people are spending $500K to $1 million a month on meta ads. And I've got to like try to weed through and figure out the strategy and work with the team. And it was a lot. I felt underwater for sure. But I think that like for me, that was a huge key to me being able to grow in the space and to make so much traction so fast was definitely a part of just like diving in the deep end.
Yeah. How was it to manage those huge budgets and like being responsible for that? Because I still remember how terrified I was launching like the first ads with like $10 to $20 per day budgets, because it was not my money. It was like other people's money. And I was just terrified of them losing on that and then them being pissed that like I spent the money and didn't get any results.
Yeah, no, it's scary, but I think that like that fear kind of drives you to like learn more, right? So like at that point, I'm waking up at 6 a.m. and I'm working till like 8 or 9 p.m. and I'm just like messaging my managers at all times of the day, just on them sideways about like, hey, what about this? What about this? Pulling every metric that I can and like, kind of figuring out what's important, what's not. And, like I said, I think that it comes down to like, it's very scary, but that like drove me to learn so much faster. But there's just like a sense of responsibility that comes with it of like you are managing other people's money. And with these bigger brands, there's a lot of different people, a lot of different eyeballs on it. You've got to go and you've got to meet with higher tier people within those companies and talk about and explain your reasons behind what you're doing on the Meta side or what you're allocating spend towards. And yeah, I mean, it definitely checks you, I'll say, and makes you learn faster.
Yeah, it does. And then what made you switch from like working in those huge agencies to going the solo route?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm not a huge agency person. Uh, in the traditional model that I've worked at personally so far, I think that there's a lot of times where scale, it comes before profit, comes before the client, and those things didn't rub me the right way, and just wasn't what resonated with me. And no disrespect to anybody like I've worked with in the past or anything like that, it just wasn't for me. And I would get really good results for these brands, and then it would be okay. How do we take this brand from spending, that I might have taken from 10K a month to spend to 100K a month and spend? It's going to be how do we get them to 300 and 400K a month and spend, even if it's not profitable for them, even if they're not that type of brand that's pushing, who's ready for that. And we would often, see clients start to struggle because of that. And so for me, I really wanted to put profitability first, and make sure that with the clients that I work with, like they were able to grow in a steady rate, and we're constantly communicating. And it's more like one-to-one, right? Like if I work at an agency, I'm going to get stretched between like, I'd say 7 to 10 accounts. And I can't really give a lot of personalized advice. And on my own, I'm able to choose my own workload and give a much more deep like connection to these brands. And for me as well, be able to be educated across things outside of Meta, and really get into talking about the supply chain, talking about how everything I do on the platform as we're scaling the business, how that affects everything else. And to really become more of like a CMO, helping them on the entire business rather than just worrying about something in Ad Manager, something in Meta.
Yeah. So basically, going more the holistic route, and also more like as a growth operator of the brand, and not only like platform specific, and getting like good in platform metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love talking to junior media buyers because, like, for me, one of the best ways that I learned was talking to people who just had been media buying for a while, and I still do that quite a bit. And when I talk to junior media buyers now, it's like one of the biggest things I say is always get out of the platform, right? Go check your Shopify metrics and look at your new and returning revenue. Look at your new customer acquisition cost versus your returning and things like that. Make sure you're not over investing in non-incremental returning revenue, things like that. That really change your mindset and how you're looking at Meta. And honestly, how what you're doing, again, is impacting the business. Because for a lot of these businesses, Meta is 70 to 80% of your overall budget, and driving a significant portion of your revenue. And so if the future of the business is dependent on what the media buyer is doing, but the media buyer doesn't understand the back end, then there's like an inherent massive disconnect in what's going on with your business.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, that's also how we are approaching that and approach scaling businesses. I used to work like very heavily inside the platforms, like inside Meta, inside Google, and optimize everything for that. But over the past, I think 1 or 2 years, slowly shifting more and more away from that. On the one side, obviously, because the platforms are just optimizing more and more, and there's like less manual work to do, like inside the platforms. But then on the other side, also because like I've realized how much more important everything else is. Um, yeah, and that you can't rely on just the in-platform metrics to make decisions.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and you managed the. You said that the traditional agency model for you is broken or it's not really working. Like, what do you think is the biggest problem with that?
Uh, I think it's just the way the model works. Maybe this is an inherent model problem, but from what I've seen, every single time what ends up happening is it starts with like very true like desire to help brands, and you maybe are really good at media buying yourself, or you bring on some good media buyers and you bring on a couple brands, you start to do really good work, you start to get really good results that attracts more clients, and then the agency has trouble turning down that extra work, right? It's like, okay, I guess I'll scale, right? Like I'll take on this more work, and then you start to either stretch yourself or your team thin, and then that continues to go outwards, and then the quality of the results starts to decrease. Things start to change slower. You're not as fast to move on newer updates, and like updating your SOPs and changing how you're looking at things. And again, I think the biggest thing is like stretching your team too thin and assigning junior buyers and strategists to situations that they probably shouldn't be in, right? Like being at an agency and seeing somebody come off the street pretty green to get trained up to be a strategist, and then getting thrown on an account spending whatever $300K plus a month. That's pretty tough considering the fact that like that brand needs efficiency right now. They can't be paying for your buyer at an agency to be learning how to do this stuff. So I think that the inherent value for most brands tends to be broken. There's like 10% of less of agencies that I've seen that do it really, really well. And those, like the upper bound of agencies, I would say beats freelance and beats contract, beats in-house, a bunch of different situations. But those are like outsized cases. Those are few and far between. They're harder to find, and I've seen most brands end up shuffling between 5 to 10 agencies before they either decide this isn't for me or they actually find one that works for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in theory it's the same with like freelancers, contractors, that like the top 10% are amazing to work with and they get amazing results, and with the rest it's very difficult. But I guess there you still have like more control, like more training that you can provide, more they get more insights into the brand, like what is really moving the needle, what is important, what are the goals, and that basically offsets that difference, and helps you like even have a slightly worse in-house person still get better results than a slightly better agency. At least that's
I think
what I think.
Yeah, one of the bigger problems that I end up seeing, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot, is like you get into an account where the owner doesn't know that they have a problem, right? Like they think that their media buying is really good. They think that their agency is doing a great job. And maybe they just have really good product market fit, but not a great agency. And I've seen that happen plenty of times, or even the agency is being either intentionally or unintentionally deceptive, right? Like doing more remarketing on Meta because it looks better in platform. I've seen both cases where like they're doing that intentionally and where they're also doing it unintentionally and have no idea because they don't know better. I don't know which case is worse, but neither are good for the business.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I see that a lot. Like I'm doing a lot of like ad account audits, and yeah, I would say every second or third audit that I do has some kind of those issues, like either like too much retargeting and remarketing to existing customers, on Google, a bunch of like branded traffic that makes the results just look better. Yeah, and a lot of those things. Also like way too long, like attribution windows and like whatever you can do to make the in-platform results look better. But for the business long term, it's not better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I still go into plenty of accounts where, you go in and you're able to chop half the ad spend and keep the exact same company revenue. And all of a sudden now you can scale back up through new customers, and all of a sudden the business is growing much faster again. And that's honestly like one of the best things you can do going into a new account. It's just like, okay, let's just shift everything over to new customers for most brands. And then you can grow pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. We had exactly that happen with a client a few months ago. That we basically went in there and we just reduced the budget by 30%, and yeah, the revenue was exactly the same. And they were like, yeah, they couldn't believe it, because
Yeah.
they realized how much money they were spending over the past few years, because they had this set up for a very, very long time. Yeah,
Yeah. Age-old story.
yeah. And I mean, you've worked with a lot of like huge brands like Thrive Causemetics, Dr. Squatch, and those, as you mentioned, that are spending a lot of money. Like, what would you say do those brands do right, and what were like your biggest learnings from working with them?
Yeah, those ones are so interesting because they get so deep. There's like tiers to the people doing their Facebook account. that we would be working with from the agency side. But I think one of the biggest things is like their investment, and this is even 4 years ago now, but like their investment in creative, right? Like I know it's beating a dead horse at this point. It was more unique and interesting to say how important it was to invest in your creative back then, but truly, like the process behind identifying everybody who would buy your product and all the objections and going through all your reviews meticulously, and coming up with all the different angles, right? And giving a ton of different reasons to purchase and hit these different people at different stages of awareness. I think that just, yeah, the granularity of those brands and identifying their customers was one of the more impressive things to me, and really emphasized like, how important it is to hit creative, I want to say not just creative volume, but like the value prop of your creative, like something that actually resonates with your audience. I say this a lot today is like it shifted a little bit more from when I was back at the agency. The agency I was working at was Rickhouse, and it's a creative agency. And those creative agencies, I think, have struggled a bit more in recent years because a creative has moved more towards, I would say, feed optimized. Like you want to be an advertiser who fits directly in your consumer's feed in a way that's not sticking out like a sore thumb, doesn't come off like an ad. It comes off as authentic. It comes off as like value or education that like your users want to watch. And I think, again, this is something like those larger brands that have more money to be throwing at meta ads, they're learning much faster than these smaller brands. And so I'm seeing a lot of smaller brands now, smaller, I would say, in terms of like if you're spending like less than 30 to 40,000 a month on Meta, you're probably doing a lot of like bottom of funnel direct response advertising still, and confused as to why you can't get the same results as those larger advertisers who have things that they're running as ads that you would never know are an ad. Like I'm constantly pulling examples from other brands that are working with sponsored influencers, that just like you watch it and you're like, wow, this is just a regular piece of Instagram content. And they're just like, I think I actually showed this example the other day where there was an influencer cooking and he used a bottle of olive oil from this well-known olive oil company. And you would not know it's an ad because it's just a regular piece of content for him, but he calls it out in the middle of it. And like, that's great for the brand. I'm sure it does great numbers. And it's just those small things that like, again, those big brands that are spending so much and testing so much are able to learn much faster.
And do you think the same approach makes sense for like small brands? Because historically, I was always a fan of like, if you're a really small brand, you should focus more on like direct response, bottom of the funnel to just get the first conversions, get the first purchases. And then at a certain level, you can transition more into education, value, brand awareness, like all of those things that will get you better results long term. But I'm slowly starting to shift. And I think that right now, like how everything is evolving, even for smaller brands, they should go more into that direction. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be the use case of like low hanging fruit, and going for that low hanging fruit when you're in your initial testing phase. If you're sub 10K a month, like I'm sure you can hammer direct response ads, like just only direct response, without like a banger piece of content. But the way I always like to describe it with e-commerce is like it's like a staircase, right? Like it's going up and to the right, but like you have these like plateaus. And when you're looking at that in your business and you need to crack that next level, it always ends up being like, at least when you're talking about Facebook ads and taking it to the next level, becomes one outsized piece of content. It's not like a bunch of different winners. It's like we made 10 ads and all of them contributed to us being able to spend 100K a month. It vast majority of the time is like one ad that is like a universal winner that takes your account to this massive next level. And those ads are typically not direct response bottom of funnel. It's like some kind of value or education ad that like is very watchable, very entertaining, and really moves people almost through the entire funnel on its own. And so if you want to find those winners, you can't really focus on just like bottom of funnel direct response. And so, yeah, I think that it makes sense for a small brand to still lean into those bottom of funnel concepts. But overall, you should always be putting a percentage of your tests and iterations into trying to crack that big winner. Because of course you need revenue now, but if you want to actually scale, you're going to have to find an outsized piece of content.
And how do you find that? because
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of founders and brands are tired of like creating like hundreds of pieces of content, and none of them really like move the needle. And
Yeah.
like their media buyer, the agency, just tells them like, yeah, you need more. We need more creative. You need to create more. And no matter like how much they create, the results don't really improve.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I mean, of course, and that I think is one of those things that like sounds like a broken record for every media buyer, and I had noticed that pattern in myself, and so I made it a concerted effort to make sure that I was quantifying that. Like, what does that mean when I say I need more creative? What does that look like? Like, what are we actually trying to get? And what that looks like is like deep customer obsession, like meticulous research. So for me, it's implementing a post-purchase survey and asking like very direct questions. I'm scraping all the customer reviews from Amazon, from from Facebook ads, from our website. Like you're scraping all those reviews, you're scraping all the objections, and then you're really trying to create these ads that are tailored around like, well, what are people like having issues with when they're first finding out about our product? And start addressing that in different ways. A lot of the time, it's like story-based content that's very educational. I think that might be overdone at this point, but that is what typically you'll see win in an account. But to synthesize that in the best way, it's really being thoughtful about what you're doing. And for me, like with one of my brands, that was what we did. Like we basically, instead of trying to produce 100 creatives, this brand was spending about 20K a month. Instead of trying to produce 100 creatives every month, we just didn't have the creative department for that. And they also like are much more brand centric, I'll say. So they don't want to just pump out a bunch of low quality creative. They really care about what people are seeing on their feed. We talked pretty deeply about what we wanted to do. We had decided to highlight one specific product. So this brand sells olive oil, and we wanted to highlight one of our bottles and what went into making it, where it comes from, how it's sourced, everything done transparently in a story format. And we made like 5 or 6 ads in a month, like every single month. That was it. We didn't blow it out of the water with volume of creative. And then after like 2 or 3 months of just doing that, we found one big winner and scaled the ad account from 20K a month to 80K a month. And that did numbers for their business. It was massive. They doubled revenue year over year. They sold out of the product. It was great. And that all came down to thinking about what we're doing instead of just chasing volume.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to like implementing that, like you do the research first, and then you want to implement that piece of create that piece of content. Like, what's your view on like which style it should be? Like whether it's, I don't know, UGC style where you like talk about the angle, whether it's like founder led content, whether it's influencer led, whether it's story based. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have a particular preference for it. I think that founder has done well for a long time, but again, it's one of those things that's kind of getting overplayed now because it's been done by so many different people. I think that doing something that feels authentic to your brand is the most important thing, that you're making this like watchable content. When I was at, I believe it was D2C Roundtable in November in San Diego, Gary Vee was on stage, and I thought it was a really interesting selection for him to be up there, just given like this is a group of like raw performance marketers, and you're bringing on, Gary Vee obviously has an agency in the space, but feels a little different, right? More brand side.
Yeah.
And one of the things he talked about was the importance of starting your paid strategy with organic. Like everything that you make for paid, he said, should be tested first on organically. You post it on organic, see if it does well, and then you move it into your ad account. And this is something that like Fresh Chili Co. is doing, and they're a pretty big D2C brand. They're top 1% of Shopify brands. They are just making organic content, and then they're moving that into their ad account, right? So these like some of the top brands out there that you're seeing, and this is something I do in my own experience, is like if I'm suffering for content, I'll just take our top organic content and run it right into our ad account. I think that's the biggest gut check that you can have. Instead of saying like, I want a specific format, I want a founder story, I want a UGC style, like that's great. You can see what's working from other brands. But the biggest thing is like, is this something that when you post it organically, it just does well? It does well and resonates with your audience and gains its own traction. Because again, with that olive oil brand, that's how we're doing it. And that's what we continue to do. We just had 2 or 3 different posts in the last 2 months all blow up organically on their own. And that really is the key to growing your business overall. At the end of the day, you also don't want your entire business to be centered around meta ad dollars, right? You're very reliant on an ecosystem that could very quickly change. I know there's meta outages even right now. So, that stuff impacts your bottom line. And so you want to, insulate yourself from that a little bit and try to grow organically. And yeah, I also view that as the best way to inform your paid ad strategy.
Yeah, definitely. And I also always see like a very, very strong correlation between when something performs well organically and something then performs well on paid ads. And one of the fastest scale ups that we had with a client was one where we came into the business and they had a bunch of viral organic content, and they've been producing like organic content for many, many months and had a few videos that had a few million views. And they were running zero ads at all. And we were able to, I think, 17x the revenue in like 2 months
Yep.
of working together, until like the operations completely broke down and everything. Like we had to stop everything.
Yeah.
But it was basically, we just took the organic content that performed well, that went viral before, and then ran it as ads. For some of them, maybe made some small tweaks. But that was like the core of the strategy. And we basically scaled up the ad spend from 0 to spending 5K per day over the first 2 months of working together. Nice. So that definitely works.
Yeah, love to see that.
And you said before that for you, like an ad shouldn't feel like an ad. Mm-hmm. How do you guide your clients into that direction? Because at the same, like a lot of brands still want to make sure that everything is on brand and everything fits like the brand, the brand guidelines that they have. But then if you want to make something that doesn't look like an ad, it oftentimes conflicts with those guidelines.
Yeah, I think one of the bigger problems you run into with that is like, if you say, I don't want this to look like an ad, you might get something that doesn't have a call to action or doesn't, not that, you don't always need a call to action, but at the end of the day, if you don't have something that compels the user to actually click on the video and go and purchase your product, then it's not going to matter. I know that one of the better examples I got given early in my career was, creative strategist at the first agency I was at basically said like, I can change the hook to a computer on fire and people will stop on it and maybe click, but they're not going to purchase the product that's about soap, right? Like that's not going to help. And so, yeah, it does matter what you're putting in that ad, and you do want to make it compelling. And yeah, I think one of the more important things there is just like kind of what I alluded to earlier about like being able to tell a story with it and being able to like, make it very relatable. I think that the more objection handling you can do within your ads and like tying it back to the product and making it like, hey, this is how this solves your outcome. Like this is your dream outcome. You're selling, quote unquote, selling the vacation instead of like everything that goes into it. The more you'll get to that successful ad, the more you'll get closer to like being able to take that next step.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, the thing that you just mentioned with the hook, we also see that a lot, that there are like certain hooks or certain creative that you can create that will just work for like a huge audience, and like a lot of people will watch it just because it's interesting for everyone, and it's like just a piece of content that everyone would watch. And like if you check the view rate on the ads and the engagement, it might look great, but then if you don't like reach the right people, and if you don't target like the right audience, then in the end you're still just wasting money, and you're getting a lot of reach, a lot of awareness, but it's not from the right audience. So in the end, it's about finding the basically being able to combine like a hook that appeals to a lot of people, but from the right audience, and that you're still targeting as many as possible of the right people and not just everyone.
Yeah, that intentionality, I know that started to take hold more last year and the year before, where Meta's algorithm moved so significantly towards broad targeting that, you start opening an ad with exactly with the demographic you're going for. So if you're a beauty brand and you say like, this is the perfect mascara for moms in their 50s, whatever it's going to be, right? So that ad will just start hammering that demographic, and like those call outs that are much more tailored to whatever you're shooting after ended up becoming a lot more popular. And that's still like, the most important thing right now is like being very intentional about who you're speaking to and how you're speaking to them, to be honest. I know there's a gum brand that I just went and bought a product from, I think like 2 or 3 months ago, that was specifically talking about like uh, chewing gum that is healthy for your teeth. And this is like, for me, like I had been recently like looking into different ways to take care of my oral health better. And then I got to serve these ads that like felt very tailored to the thing that I care about, right? Like very organic, like gum that like, was healthier for me to chew on. And so it basically is like doing a good job of like that ad specifically did a good job of like reaching out to a health conscious consumer and talking to me in a way of like, this will improve your oral health. And I know that that's something you care about. And so, obviously that goes into the whole privacy stuff with Meta and how good they are at targeting. But regardless, that stuff matters in terms of like when your audience is actually going to serve your ad, how tailored to them does it feel? And again, does it feel watchable? Does it feel like something that like I'm actually interested in?
Yeah, exactly. And I also tell all of our clients, always all the brands that create content for ads, to be very intentional and very clear about like who exactly that content is for. And basically, as you mentioned before, like if a brand has 3 different avatars, 3 different like buyer personas that they want to target, it should be very, very obvious who that specific ad, that specific piece of content is made for. And ideally someone who like wasn't there while the content was getting produced should be able to know like who that content is for. Um, yeah, and basically sometimes if they just share content, I basically just ask like, yeah, who's that for? Like, who are you targeting with that? And oftentimes the brands just don't know that. It's just for everyone, for our clients, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think there was, I don't know if you ever read this, but there was an old Sam Altman blog. This might have been like the mid like 2010s, where he said more people would be better off thinking about what they do before they do it. And I think that like if you spent like 10 times more time thinking about the action and then doing the action, you will have a better outcome. In the case of making ads, I think that is the big area people miss, is like being really intentional about what we're about to create before we just say we need 50 more ads and you just crank out like, okay, we sell fans. Let's like just talk about all the reasons you need a fan. And maybe you don't hit even the objections and the main points of friction that your customers are feeling and why they're kind of coming to you in the first place. So yeah, I think that's a huge thing in the space, is like just, again, being way more intentional about what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think the majority of the time when you create new content, new ads, should go into the prep, into the research, into like knowing exactly what you want to do. Because I think the majority of the creators, brands, they spend maybe 10% of the time in the prep, and then 50% of the time creating the content, and then 40% of the time editing it and in the post production. But it should be probably like 80 to 90% in the prep, and then 10 to 20% in the producing and editing the content.
Right.
You've started also leaning more into like finance, forecasting, and ops over the past few months. Why?
Just you realize that if you as the media buyer aren't, I think this alludes to what I said earlier, if you're not as a media buyer paying attention to the finance and the ops and like what you're actually contributing to the bottom line of the business, you're at risk to just burn a lot of cash. Like, you of all people who's burning the money, who's spending the money, you really need to be well in tune with the back end. I think this is something that CTC, Commentator Collective, does really, really well. And they talk about it all the time. They have plenty of great content on this on YouTube. But honestly, like, the person pulling the levers and spending the most money in your business needs to know the back end. They need to know everything that goes into your P&L, at least on the Meta side. So for me, it really comes from a place of like making sure that we're getting the best possible results from like an actual business growth perspective, and not just like trying to self-flatter myself on I have a great return on ad spend on Meta, or I have a great cost per purchase on Meta, because there's plenty of times where taking a lower return on ad spend is better for your business, right? If I am profitable at a 2x and I'm sitting here flexing to my client that got a 4x, and there's like so much room for us to grow, like, awesome, that might look good for me, but what might be best for the business is to take that 2x, grow faster, and then retain those customers. So, it comes from like trying to marry a very holistic viewpoint and become more of like a growth partner to these businesses, again, rather than being like self-flattering.
Yeah. And what do you think most founders get wrong when it comes to like looking at their numbers?
Revenue over profit. I think that I feel like most people will probably give that answer. I think that's the most accurate answer. I think that a lot of founders are trying to get as much revenue as fast as they can because they have this dream of an acquisition, and save for 2021, like 2020, 2021, that just doesn't happen as much in e-commerce. There's not as like there's people aren't coming to save you, right? Like there's not a lot of money that's going to come save you. You should probably be worrying at this level about being profitable. And I think that a lot of companies get really tied up in just trying to generate as much revenue as possible to be as flashy as possible. And they think, well, we'll cash flow at a later date. And eventually what you see happen is that maybe you don't have the retention that you expect. You hit a shipping mishap. There's going to be something that falls through. And if you already aren't profitable and you don't have that backstop to land on, it becomes a big issue. And so I would say like, revenue over profit, and growth over honestly staying in the game. Like I think Sean Frank had a really good tweet about this. He said like the longer you stay in the game, you're going to catch one of the good cycles. Like, every 10 years, there's a couple good cycles in it. And so the longer you can stay in the game, the more likely you are to have success. And that is the, number of years in the game is the outcome you should optimize for. And I think that not enough founders try to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, the longer you're in business, the more luck surface area you have, and the higher the chances that you'll get lucky because you're just in the business for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, a mistake at 1 million is a lot different than a mistake at 100 million. Very, very different in terms of how that impacts the success and health and longevity of your business being able to survive. And the reality is that you're going to make a lot more of that success, those mistakes earlier in your time running the brand. And so if your goal is just to scale as hard and as fast as possible, those mistakes are going to be much bigger as a result. And so again, it's just a much riskier proposition that can take a really good business that grows really fast out of the equation just as fast.
Yeah. And how do you balance the approach with like focusing more on profit rather than revenue, with also like convincing the client that like if a 2x return ad spend is still profitable, pushing the 2x return ad spend rather than the 4x return ad spend, because the client could say like, yeah, at 4x we're more profitable, and I would rather be more profitable right now. So how do you find the balance there?
Yeah, contribution margin for sure. Like you just talk to the client, you explain what that is and how that breaks down for them, right? And I think that's one of the harder concepts to grasp is like, you want to take the most profit, but you can actually generate more profit at a lower return on ad spend a lot of the time. And that can be a difficult concept to grasp and a risky concept to grasp, especially if you don't fully trust your media buyer, to be honest. So I think that comes down to education a lot of the time, at least in my experience. And yeah, talking about like how much do we want to take in terms of profit per new customer from a dollar amount perspective. What does the contribution margin look like on that? And then being very intentional and very aligned as you take those next steps. But I think, I think that it's just education and honestly trust. Like both sides really need to be very trusting in that partnership. And I think that a lot of agencies to like business partners just lack that inherent trust.
Yeah, I agree. And how would you say, how do you balance creative strategy and like the longer term brand aspect of the business with like that financial modeling and short term results?
I I would say like to divert that is like just making sure that you are growing the business, right? Like and from the perspective of like if you're looking at the ad account and you're looking at like new versus existing and how you're spending your dollars, um, it's important to be efficient and make sure that you're generating profit and a good return on ad spend, whatever that looks like for your business, of course, up front. But you also need to have the 1,000-yard view of like, we need to also be paying for new customers to view our ads too. We need to be watching our rolling reach. We need to be like getting net new people into our funnel, or else we're going to hit a wall. And I think that's another thing that like brands miss big time. Like I would say like 80% of brands do not understand that concept of like, okay, instead of just focusing on our bottom of funnel results and like we're getting a good MER, we're getting good ROAS, like those things are very important, but like, are you also getting more people in your funnel and growing and putting yourself in a position to succeed in 4 to 6 months? Like, what about the buyers? When you're in mid-July and you're advertising, you have to be cognizant that a lot of those buyers, at least the higher AOV you get, a lot of those buyers are going to kick the can down the road, maybe join during a Prime Day sale. Maybe they'll join during Christmas time, during Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And how are you investing in getting those people in the business? And so, yeah, again, watching like cost per new visitor, your rolling reach metrics, things like that, to make sure that you have, again, a holistic business view. Are you putting yourself in a position to grow over the long run?
Yeah, that makes sense. When you consider taking on a new brand and working with them, like what are some red flags that you watch out for?
Oh man, that's a great question. Um, I think the first thing is what you said earlier of the conversation around profitability. And so sometimes you'll meet with these founders and they'll say, I really want to run at a 4x return on ad spend. And you'll look at the business and say, actually, it makes a lot more sense for you to run at like a 1.5, if that's feasible, right? If you're a returning customer business. And because I've had this exact conversation, it's like you can run at a 1x. That would be amazing for you. You could do way more business at this and you would be profitable. And here's your cashback period. Like, here's how much that will take to get all that money back and grow. And they look at it and they're like, no, I would much rather you be able to spend like, it's cool if you can spend $100,000 at, whatever, a 2x ROAS, but can you spend $100,000 at a 4x? It's like that unrealistic outcome of like what's actually achievable and not understanding that there's a lot of market dynamics at play. Right. There's a lot of other people trying to do the same exact thing and acquire the same exact customer as you. So yeah, I think that not having realistic expectations, and honestly, not understanding your numbers deep enough are two like massive red flags for me with founders.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, it happens over and over again that I hop on an audit or something or on a sales call, and just from like looking at the business for like half an hour, I know more about the numbers than the person I'm talking to, and that's usually not a good sign.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's tough because it's very busy. There's a lot of things going on as a founder. And like on the agency side, there's definitely people who take advantage of that the other way around and maybe don't understand the numbers at all. And the founder knows them better. And the founder's just like, oh, you have no idea what you're doing. I think it's important for both sides to come to the table with good points and knowing and understanding what you're talking about and being able to have that high level conversation if you want to have success and be able to bring the business to the next level. But like that, yeah, that's a huge red flag. Like you can't get anywhere with that because the results are always going to be misaligned on both sides.
Yeah, exactly. Now that you're not working in an agency anymore, like how do you handle client relationships? And has that changed from the time when you were in an agency?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely has. For me, the clients are way more trusting. Like we hop on calls once a week. It's very casual. It's like we talk about all the numbers. I ask them what's their main concern, and we're kind of running through the entire business. And then I'm giving them like, here's everything that I'm working on, and here's my priority, not just now, but for the next like 2-3 months. And we're just like very much growth partners rather than when it was agency, it was a little bit more buttoned up. Of course, like I'm representing a business, but also like, you go in there and you roll in, you say, here's the performance. Here's the performance of the last 2 weeks. Here's the performance of the last month of ads. Here are the ads that we're going to make in the future. And that's that. And you just kind of move on. This situation is much more like, okay, from a business perspective, what's the most important thing for us to leverage our time on and spend our time on to grow over the next 3 to 6 months and hit our annual goal. And I found that honestly to be the biggest like driver for success of every business I've been working with right now is like the value curve, right? Like where are we investing our time and making sure that whatever we're putting our time and effort into is the most like, high leverage, high outcome situation that we possibly can, which is maybe something I wouldn't have been able to have a pulse on, care about, or have any impact on when I was on the agency side.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you could only look at 3 metrics to when you're growing an e-commerce brand, what would those be?
It's a great question. That's a great one. Okay. I'm going to give you new customer return on ad spend / new customer CAC. Let me cheat with the same metric, but a blended new customer metric there. I'm going to take contribution margin, daily contribution margin. And then, I'm deciding between AOV, LTV, but one of those two, probably LTV, I guess. 3 month, give me 3 month LTV. And yeah, I'll take those 3 metrics.
Nice. That's a good choice. And what about only 3 metrics and then Meta ad account and not anything outside the ad account?
Yeah. 3 metrics in a Meta ad account. Spend. Spend. I'm going to take one of the bottom of funnel results, depending on the business, return on ad spend or cost per purchase. And then, obviously, like a click-through rate would probably be one of my main ones. Like you want to know how much you're clicking, getting clicks on there. And then, those are the 3 things I look at the most. I think it matters. Like, are you getting people to click? And then are you achieving your bottom of funnel result? And then like spend's like an underrated one. I know that sounds wild to say, but like when you're looking at creative testing and things like that, or what's scaling in your account, where Meta is pushing the most budget really matters. Like that is like that. Like I think that there's this misconception when you're looking at an ad account, and I can speak from my own experience, where maybe we're in a scaling campaign and we're on a brand call, and a creative strategist will say, "Oh, we have $1,000 in spend on this ad at a 2x ROAS, which is good, but look at this ad that has $100 in spend and has a 5x return on ad spend. Like that's even better." And then the company goes, "Why aren't we scaling that ad?" And then the answer is because it won't scale. Because like the 9 times out of 10, Meta's making the right decision. If you break that out into its own campaign, whatever, spend on that ad, it's not going to scale. And so that's why I say that like spend is my number 1 metric that I'd be looking at in the ad account.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. Are you also looking at CPMs?
Yeah, of course. I don't think it's like, I think that people blow it out of proportion. Like if you have really bad performance, like, it's because my CPMs are so expensive. And it's like, I don't know. I've seen situations where the CPMs are, they'll triple because we're targeting a different audience that maybe is higher value and much more targeted. But all of our bottom of funnel metrics like do much better. And at the end of the day, like if you are achieving a cost per purchase at a sustainable level, that's all that matters. I don't care how you get there. I don't care if you have a lower conversion rate and a higher click-through rate, or vice versa, or if your CPMs are drastically high or drastically low. It doesn't really matter how you get there. It just matters that you do.
Yeah. Now, as the last question, what are your 2026 predictions for ecom advertising?
It's a unique time. I think that we're in a unique era where it is so easy to stand up a store, like using these new AI softwares and just kind of vibe code a store in a day and get a product shipped out there and generate all these fake reviews. And I think there's an inherent lack of trust on the consumer side right now. And I do expect like AI ads, AI UGC to take off until there's some kind of regulation on it. And so I think that you're going to see a huge uptick in these, like the success of these AI UGCs this year, which isn't a hot take. But I do think as a result, you will also see a huge number of like a much more success on brands that are running like super authentic campaigns, like in the warehouse content, like low res UGC, like somebody who like barely knows what they're doing or just like clearly isn't like a regular creator, that seems like just gives more authenticity. Like you will see outsized results on both of those, right? I think that anything in the middle is going to struggle the most. But super authentic or super well done UGC that like you could just keep pumping out a ton of content is probably going to be the two biggest winners, I think, in this year, at least from a creative perspective.
Yeah. So how would you say can brands combat that? Is it primarily due to like creating that very, very authentic content? And
It
how
depends what
long
you
do
care
you think
about.
will it? How long do you think will it take until AI will then also create really authentic content?
I don't think it's going to be anytime. Uh, I was not to say anytime soon because I think it is soon. Like I think that it is getting really good at making that authentic content. The one factor here, I do want to say this now. Actually, Meta will probably be assigning some kind of label to these AI ads at some point. It's a net negative for Meta for people to not trust the platform and not trust the content on the platform. It is
Yeah.
not. I do think that Meta is going to be doing what they can to push back against this, not for the good of the consumer, to be clear, but for the good of their own business. And so that's why I do think that that will change. Um, but how can brands combat that? It depends on your objective, to be honest. Like if you don't have a problem making AI UGC and you're like, hey, like, as long as the regulations aren't being enforced, I know that there is regulations around it right now, but as long as it's not being enforced, I'm going to go and do that. Cool, do your thing. If you get caught, that's on you. But yes, absolutely, I do. I am encouraging my brands to lean into much more authentic stories and connections with our customers. Honestly, like reaching out to our customers, especially our most loyal customers, like just going out there, seeing who spent the most money with our brand, reaching out to them, giving them some free product and being like, hey, we would love if you would participate in an ad for us. There's no pressure, but like we would love to have you do that because you're one of our best customers. And so, yeah, just more authentic, more authentic content, trying to create, I would say, a moat with your customers, like building a community with your customers. I think like Snarky Tea does a really good job of this, where they have like a great Facebook community and people love being a part of it. It's like a big sisterhood within it. And I think that that's really important for brands these days, is to like be really true to your customers when you get them in the door, because I think that there's a lot of brands that are just trying to take advantage of their customers and just trying to scale without that level of like care for what they're putting out there.
Yeah. That was awesome. Really
Yeah.
appreciate you hopping on. I always love talking to you. I learned a lot. It's always really valuable, and yeah, I just really enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I love it. I appreciate you having me on. It's this fantastic conversation, and yeah, appreciate it.
Where can people find you if they want to either talk to you or work with you?
Yeah, Sebastian Williams on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. I don't, post a lot or anything like that, but I do answer my DMs. Always happy to talk. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Sounds great. Appreciate you.
Cool. Appreciate you.